What is the worst experience you have ever had with your neighbors? When I first moved in my house, I didn't know my exact property line yet, so I put wood by a tree I thought was mine. Neighbor came over saying it was his tree. So, I went ahead and got a survey to settle any troubles. He was pissed when I got 10 feet beyond the tree. Problem solved though. He came home from the bar with his friend, both drunk. They were screwing around with a pistol and accidentally shot through their floor, down into my apartment. I got hit in the stomach. Called 911, and when the ambulance was taking me away, my panicked fiancée was getting ready to leave because the EMTs told her to follow instead of riding with. My neighbor came down and was like, "What happened?" We heard a commotion. Cops were called and he got arrested. Lived above a guy in a really old fourplex, and I guess the wood floor squeaked really loudly when I walked around. It's not like I was stomping around either, but the dude would constantly come upstairs and bang on my door and yell at me to stop moving around. I felt badly for him in the beginning, because he seemed genuinely frustrated, but he didn't seem to understand or believe that I wasn't slamming my feet on my floor his ceiling. I called my landlord several times asking him if he had a solution. I couldn't move because I was locked into my lease, but my landlord was just like, "Buy a lot of rugs." It got to the point that I couldn't take the constant yelling, and I was literally either tiptoeing around or hopping from my couch to my chair in order to get out of my living room so that he wouldn't be standing at my door yelling at me. Finally, I went downstairs one day and asked if we could talk about the situation, because I felt like maybe if I looked him in the eye when he was calm and explained that I wasn't doing it on purpose and that there was literally nothing more I could do, I had already bought Aria's rugs, he would maybe understand. So, I went downstairs and very nicely explained, and he seemed to be listening. And then he said, "I'm about at the point that if it happens again I'm going to show up at your door with a really big knife." And then he just stared at me. I basically ran out of there, called my landlord and said that I was more or less being threatened, and a month later the guy moved out. And then as soon as I could I did too. Super shitty situation. When I was around 10 years old, my neighbor would occasionally watch me open my mailbox to see if my GameStop magazine had arrived. She would threaten me each time saying she was calling the cops and that it was illegal for me to check my parents' mail. I actually believed this until I was 15 years old. Lived on the top floor of a drug house in college because it was the only place that would let 7 of us rent together. The first week we were there, the SWAT team did a raid on one of the units. There were 3 below us. They busted in the door and used flashbang grenades on them. One of the other units smelled like urine and constantly had people coming in and out buying drugs. Our keys barely fit in the lock because people had tried to pick them so much. Our cable internet stopped working, so we called the cable company to come check it. The guy took us over to the box outside and showed us 9 different illegal lines that were ripping our internet. I could go on and on. On the plus side, we could shoot bottle rockets in our hallway because it wasn't like anyone was going to call the cops on us. My neighbors and my family were absolutely fine for about 7 years. It's a nice old man that was recently remarried. They have a 20-year-old student that parties from time to time, which is fine. But then one day out of nowhere we find our 1-year-old cat dead in their garden. Obviously, we cannot be mad. The cat probably died of a heart attack or something. So, my family shrugs it off as a coincidence. Fast forward 2 months, we have a new cat, younger, cuter. I come home one day, and my cat come crawling to me giving the loudest meow of his life. Turns out my cat was shot with a bullet. Our gardener told us that he clearly saw the neighbor with a gun, shooting pigeons or something, minutes before my cat was shot. So yeah, as you can imagine, we haven't been close to our neighbors since that day. P.S. Our cat survived with surgery, perfectly fine, but only has 8 lives left. We were trying to sell our house, and the neighbor's meth head nephew was sabotaging it. When we'd leave, so people could come look at it, he would sneak around just being creepy, which turned off a lot of buyers. He even went into my house during an open house, and was telling people not to buy it. These people lived like 100 yards away, and we still don't know what his deal was. Once he started threatening my sister who tried to help him after he passed out on my driveway. She's a nurse. We called the cops, and he signed a paper that said if he was caught on the property again he'd be sent to jail. Luckily, we were able to sell it after that. I was in the process of selling my townhome, so I abandoned my house for a while and moved to another home. Dude took down the fence separating our townhomes and cut down my lemon tree. I was livid. Some 15 years ago, when my parents and I lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana, we ended up befriending one of the neighbors and her 2 kids. Well, one day, we were all hanging out together, and I noticed her son had some pretty bad bruises and a nice size knot on his head. I kinda shrugged it off, and we continued playing. Well, that night the mother comes over and confesses to my mom she killed the boy. She ended up drowning him in the bathtub after beating him severely. She wasn't remorseful at all. When she left back to her house, my mom called the cops immediately, and she was arrested shortly after. She vowed that when she got out she'd kill my mom. We moved out of Indiana and moved to another state. I once had a neighbor in college that would knock on my door and ask for money. I would just say I'm a broke student and I can't spare anything. It was weird and a weekly occurrence at the least. She was in her 50s and working. One day, I got fed up when she knocked on my door. I think I was stressed for exams, and I said, "Yeah, I got some money for you." I asked her to hold out her hands and gave her maybe $2 worth of nickels that I had in a change jar. She never bothered me again. I'm probably someone's bad experience, although they don't know it's me yet. The malfunctioning smoke alarm in my apartment complex hallway has almost become a sort of bitter joke among my neighbors. It's been chirping multiple times a day for the past 2 months, but no matter what, maintenance just can't seem to make it stop. What my neighbors don't know is that the smoke alarm only chirped consistently for about 3 days. Everything since then has been my parrot, who liked the sound so much that she's been mimicking it as often as she likes. Read 57 plus times daily, this being about month 4. They don't know I have a parrot. The woman immediately next door does think I have a dog though, because the feathery little bitch also likes to bark and then scold herself for it. A tired woman on my street follows the garbage truck and moves the garbage cans off the street, while the rest of us are at work because they are an eyesore. This would be fine except she would leave them in the middle of the driveway, and there is no stopping on our street during rush hour bus route, so you either need to park a block away to move the garbage can, then go get the car at risk getting a ticket while you move it. Since the houses are quite close together, we found out the first time by turning in and hitting the garbage can, because it was just far enough back that you couldn't see it until you turned. Moved into a brand new house. Noticed an old toilet, garbage, and a broken down hot tub in the neighbor's front yard. Okay. Made cookies for all the neighbors and went over to introduce ourselves. He laughed and slammed the door in our faces. Okay. Out landscaping our new yard with my husband and laying some bricks. Husband is on his knees making sure they are level while I stand and hand him the bricks. Neighbor walks by and yells, "Well, I can see who wears the pants." Husband and I look at each other perplexed. Okay. Get a puppy. Our other neighbor lets us know she witnessed the neighbor's grown son throwing lit cigarettes over the fence of our puppy when he was in the backyard. We found about 50 cigarette butts in our yard. We do not smoke. Then she also had to call the police because his other son broke the lights on her garage and defecated on her welcome mat, all captured by her home video system. About 6 months later, get a complaint for dog barking with a $500 fine. It was ridiculous. Our dog never barked unless someone walked by or came to the door. We had letters from all 16 surrounding neighbors attesting that our dog never barked, what great neighbors we were, and how crazy the complainant was. The letters were not admissible. Since there were 2 pathological adult sons, and the neighbors' word against ours 2 sane, working adults, we lost and had to pay. We sold the house and moved shortly afterward. In the middle of the night, strange noises would come from their apartment, like an owl mating with a German shepherd. In another, if I breathed too heavily, they'd come up and ask me to be quieter. I once told them that I was literally sitting on the couch reading a book and had no idea what noise they thought they were hearing. Another burned something in his oven. Rather than open his windows to get the smoke out, he opened his door to the hall and set off the whole building alarms. We had to all stand out in the cold and wait for the fire department while he watched from his apartment. The fire department opened his windows and told him he was an idiot. We still had to wait outside for them to do mandatory checks of everything to make sure it really was just him being stupid. It was January in New England during a cold snap. Came home to a smoke-filled apartment. Called the fire department when we couldn't find the cause. Turns out our downstairs neighbors put a charcoal grill on their stove so they could BBQ indoors. My only relief was a friend had walked my dog earlier that day, so I know he wasn't in his smoke-filled apartment all afternoon. They insisted that we pay to have a gate installed between our backyard fences, so that they may use our above-ground pool as they please, preferably when they invite friends over. When we denied, they threw a hissy fit and found an excuse to punish us. You see, the pool was going through some expensive issues with leakage into the yard. They threatened to call the fine Happy Hoa because the water was barely leaking into their yard they rarely use, and their dog was getting sick drinking the water. It wasn't. Not wanting to deal with that bullshit, and also wanting to clean our own backyard of the pond that begun housing frogs, my father spent his birthday day off from work in the Texas heat digging a trench and installing a pipe so that the water could drain. The neighbors came outside and harassed Dad the entire time he was digging the trench, telling him it would have just been easier to install the gate. Would have been easier to install a shovel into your frontal lobe, fucking profligates. One got the cops called on them because their oldest son was cracked out and got in a huge fight with the mom in the front lawn. Turns out, he was also wanted for armed robbery and aggravated assault. The cops got the wrong house and started banging on our house at 1 a.m. in the morning until my very irritated father pointed them to the real home. Not sure if that counts, because it's indirect, but yeah, it was kinda tamer than the time the girl who lived in the other side of our duplex kicked her boyfriend out, but he was tweaking on PCP and literally threw their stove through the shitty wall that connected their kitchen to ours. Fun. Oh, let's see, she told me my dad died of an incurable brain cancer because I didn't speak the tongue of Jesus and lay hands on him and pray. Before I knew how crazy she was, we let our son go to her house to play with her daughter, and when we came to pick him up, they were gone. Turns out she had driven them to her parents' house like 40 minutes away without our permission. Gave us a bag of hand-me-downs for our daughter with a razor blade in the bottom. There's so much, like how much time do you all have? Okay, here it goes, though the worst is above. It started out that we just thought she was a free-spirit, hippy-dippy Scandinavian lady with alternative parenting ideas. But we gradually learned that she was just a horrible person. The first red flag was that I picked up my 4-year-old son after a short visit playing with her younger girl, and she said they were playing beach naked most of the time. I told her he wasn't allowed to be undressed anymore, but wasn't mad, because I knew things were less uptight in Norway where she was from. Talked to my son about it. Her older daughter was always misbehaving. Her first time over to our house, she smeared chapstick all over an entire wall. She was like 6. Plenty old enough to know better. Another time she sneaked into our house, while I was outside playing with my kids, and started eating some brownies I had just made. I mean, she tore a hole right smack in the middle of the plastic wrap over the dish, and scooped out handfuls of brownies. She would pole dance on the tree out front, singing Shake Yo Money Maker. 6 years old. Maybe 7. She had birthday parties for her children, which we were invited to and brought gifts to. And then we found out their real birthdays were later in the year, when we were invited again, and tried to decline. The lady tried to explain that she celebrated half birthdays. I explained to her that I didn't. After the kidnapping incident above, my children were not allowed to play at their house anymore. We still all ran into each other walking to school. She would tell me how she saw real demons walking around disguised as people. Told me that God told her that I was really close to seeing the light and becoming Christian. It was during this time that someone called CPS on her, and she accused me of it. It wasn't me, but maybe it should have been. The dad was around and surprisingly a super nice, down-to-earth guy with a good sense of humor. He was actually the one who was at home when we tried to pick up my sons and told us she had taken them. He was mortified that she hadn't cleared it with us and that we didn't know anything about it. He was black and she was white. She made a few racist comments at one of the birthday parties that made me uncomfortable. Dead serious about how black people are always late. We finally moved, but she caught up with me one day to give me the bag used clothes for my daughter. Sliced my finger on the razor blade in the bag, luckily not very badly. That was the last I saw of her. I know there was more, but I have to put my well-adjusted kids to bed now.